What's up, Cole? You doing all right, buddy? You looking all right? That's for damn sure. Handsome boy. My dudes, today is a special day. Why? Well, one, the engine bay is painted, which you saw in the last video, but today we get to attack the suspension. I'm way more excited. Cheers. I need to show you all the stuff that I have for this car, and then we can talk about what's gonna go down in kind of like what order. First things first, we had to get a set of BC coilovers for this thing. We got the RA type. It's a standard kit. I guess by default, this is an extreme low kit for the E30. As you guys know, like E30s, when you slam them, the oil pan hangs low, a bunch of stuff like that starts to happen. So to lower the car extremely low is kind of like a given when you put coilovers on it. So I don't know that they have an extreme low kit. I think by default, it's an extreme low kit. So I got some goodies from the boys. All right, so a lot of parts have come in for this car that I haven't shown yet, like even like that exhaust manifold over there. Pretty sick. Haven't shown you everything, but I want to do this step by step and kind of show you guys the process of building the car. So step one was gutting all the interior and then addressing all the rust issues, which isn't finished just yet. We're going to get to that. More parts showed up for the tilt and pedal assembly. And then step two was gut the engine bay and prepare the engine bay for the install of the motor. The paint doesn't look bad, but I think that tonight I'm gonna throw one more coat on it, let it settle overnight, and then we'll be ready to throw in the engine and stuff. But before we get to the engine bay, one of the things I like to do is rip out the subframes out of these cars and redo all of the bushings. Now, when it comes to bushing, there's only one company you should be using because their stuff is amazing. I've been using it since I started driving. They're one of my very first partners in my career. That is Condor Speed Shop. Now you've seen me use these on a lot of builds, but I'm talking from the 4-seater beater to the pro car and everything in between. There's another project we got coming out that has a bunch of this stuff, and then also now the Beams E30. So I reached out to Condor, kind of told them about the project, and they said, yeah, dude, we got you, baby. So they sent out a bunch of stuff. The cool thing about the AK kit to mount the Beams engine into the E30 is that it can utilize stock bushings. So these are not exactly stock bushings, but Condor makes all their stuff to stock specification, meaning that these are the same spec and size as your OEM bushings. Now, Condor does sell these in like a higher rise setup so that you can get clearance with your M20 engines and your E30. But for the sake of what we're doing, we just needed the standard one. So we got the engine mounts and the transmission mounts from Condor Speed Shop. These things are gonna go great. I have ran headers very close to these and never melted them. I've seen a lot of other companies melted. I've had opportunities to work with other people, and I just don't want to because Condor stuff is good stuff. Moving on from the engine and transmission, we got some brake lines in. These are the extended boys. The front ones will help us with the angle kit, and the rear ones will just be able to get rid of a bunch of the old junk in there and throw some fresh Condor Speed Shop lines in there. Now, when it comes to the front control arms, the only way to go is these lollipop style replacement bushings, or replacement lollipops rather. They actually replace the entire lollipop and the big bushing inside. So you gain a little bit of clearance, and then you also gain some exhaust clearance as well. Standard on all my cars. Have to have them. Can't not run them. So the next item I'm going to show you is more of a clearance thing. So when you're running big V8s, or you're running, like for me, a Beams engine where the exhaust is going to be on the steering column side, you can get rid of the big, bulky, ugly steering column and those big, bulky U-joints and all that. All that stuff can go away, even the Guibo, and it will be replaced with some nice U-joints and a very nice stainless rod, I believe. Super solid. I have done something very similar to this in the Pro car, so I'm excited to get this in here and get the clearance for the Beams engine. Moving to the rear end of the car. The way that the E30 subframe mounts into the chassis is that you have the two front pickup points, and then you have the third mounting spot in the back, which is the diff. So in order to reinforce the subframe to the chassis and not get a bunch of wobble in it and have issues where cracking and different things like that occur, we throw in the hard mounts. So I got the subframe mounts and the differential mount. And then I have the rear control arm mounts. These are kind of special. The reason that these are special is that they're kind of offset. So the hole is not exactly perfectly in the center. They're off to the side. And the reason that they're off to the side is so that you can adjust camber and toe in the rear end. So naturally, when you slam these cars on the floor, they gain a ton of negative camber. So this is gonna help us fight that because we're planning on lowering the car. I don't know if we're gonna go to the floor, but my old car was very slammed and it was terrible for drifting because you'd wear out half the tire. Worked good for the M20 because we didn't put the whole tire on the floor, but these should help us, and being that we have a beams motor, should be better. Now this is one of my favorite pieces that they sent me so far. These are door handles that have been drilled and countersunk, and they replaced these old beat up handles. So we'll have a nice OEM replacement that goes in there to add a little bit of style, a little bit of weight reduction, but mostly style. These things are sick. I can't wait to put these on. Just that alone, I was already like, oh my God, those are sick. Now that I've shown you all the Condor stuff, it's time to start tearing in the suspension on this. The front end shouldn't be too bad. We are gonna have to remove the front strut because we have the BC coilovers, and I'll show you kind of something weird about those with the E30. There's not too much to do in the front. Most of the work's gonna be done in the back. So let's get started, tear these wheels off, and try to get that subframe out of the car tonight. All right, so it looks like everything is pretty damn rusty. Now what we're gonna do exactly to fight that, I don't know, potentially new rotors front and rear. A lot of the suspension is dirty. Doesn't look like there's a lot of rust on the suspension. It looks like it just needs to get a good pressure washing. So in today's episode, we're going to drop the entire rear subframe. So there's a couple ways that you can kind of go about this. One of the ways I normally do it is I'll disconnect the front subframe from the front two pickup points, and then I will disconnect the brakes and shocks, and then just drop the whole rear subframe out of the floor, work on it, swap all the bushings, paint it, clean it, whatever we have to end up doing to get it back together. But let's just get into it, man. Let's get into it and let's get this thing together, and I just can't wait to drive it. So the sooner I get this stuff done, the faster I get to drive it. Ready to come out. Let's see how this goes. Look front heavy. Try to balance it. Oh, a little front heavy. So I'll grab the diff gear here and we'll keep going. Boom. It's pretty much out. Nice. Well, let's pull it out of underneath the car now and take a look at it. This wheel dollies come in clutch for moving the subframes around. I'm just gotta make sure they're under there right. Well, there she is. Pretty simple to get the rear end out. Again, it's really only 3 points. Front two pickups, the rear diff, and then you can undo the brake lines at this junction here. The soft lines that go from here to the chassis are the ones we're gonna be replacing, and along with these ones that go directly to the caliper as well. But you pretty much disconnect it there, and then I cut off my wheels, my ABS stuff, because I'm not going to use those at all. The way that these E30s work, from what I remember, is that your speedometer reads off of your differential. So this thing had like a wire tag on here, I guess, so it doesn't come undone. I think this is like OEM. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I've never seen these before, so I'm assuming this is like an OEM thing. Never seen it before. Diff's pretty bad. It's pretty freaking dirty. There's actually like, I don't want to like mess it up and dirty it inside the garage, but there's a thick layer of like gunk just built up on this thing because it's been probably never pulled out of the car. Most of these haven't. So I need to wash the whole rear end. Cool part about the E30 is that the springs come off pretty freaking easy. It's one spring removed. and then you'll just grab the other side, wiggle it a little. Bam, 2 springs removed. We no longer need those. Those are junk to us. And we need to replace all these bushings. So I need to remove the drive shaft, and then we'll take this thing out in the driveway and pressure wash the entire thing. Get it as clean as possible, and then we'll jump into like painting and different things like that, and we'll figure out what exactly we're gonna paint, if we're gonna paint anything. Because again, there's not like a lot of like, this is just a bunch of dirt. And underneath there, somewhere underneath there, is some nice black paint from BMW that's OEM. So we'll leave this pretty much till the morning, and it's time now. Sorry about all the mess too. The garage is a total mess right now. That's a floor that I cut out from the junkyard. I don't think we're ever gonna show you guys that footage. Or no, they wouldn't let us film this actually. But we cut out floors to replace the floors in this thing, and then the boys came up with a different way to do it. So junk. Now, back into the front. So the weird thing about the E30 is that the front strut is actually connected to the spindle. So what I can basically do is I have 2 options in regards to the brakes. I can undo the caliper bolts, hang the caliper to the side, or I can undo the brake line. And then I have a tie rod point here. I have a tie rod pickup that needs to be undone, and then I also have a control arm and a sway bar. Looking at it right now, this is my game plan. Tie rod out, sway bar from the bottom on the 13 mil, because I already know that'll right off, no problem. And then I'll undo the brake line, because I want to take this whole thing out anyways. I actually want to get rid of the dust shield, and I want to get rid of these sensors, the ABS and the wheel speed sensors. Or this is a brake wear sensor, it looks like. Yeah, brake wear indicator light thing, and the ABS. I want to get rid of all that stuff, and then I want to get rid of the dust shield on the backside too. I like having these spindles pretty raw. Like I might end up taking off those dust shields on that as well. It exposes a bunch of stuff, so I don't necessarily recommend it, but for me, when I'm working on things, it's a little bit easier to get to stuff without those shields being on there. So let's get the front struts out of this freaking pig and move forward with our lives, huh? Bada boom, there it is. Front strut is out, and these are heavier than I thought it was gonna be. There she is, old dusty and crusty. That's pretty much the whole front end and rear end of this car. Like, the control arm's still in there, right? But this is the gist of building like an E30 to a gnarlier extent. And by gnarlier, I mean like doing the full bushing swap, doing the front coilovers, doing the front control arm stuff. You can also just throw in the coilovers. Like, you don't have to drop the rear end to do the coilovers. You can just literally undo the shock bolt, pop the spring out, put the new BC shock in there, and then put the new spring on, and you're done with the rear end. On the front end, you got to cut it off and weld on a BC coilover actually. So I'll show you how we do that coming up, but pretty much it in here. It's time to take these things out front and start pressure washing. Oh, I got to remove the other side, but I'll do that off camera. We'll be outside. Ready? 3, 2, 1. There it is. So we're outside. Time to get to washing. Let's get the pressure washer out and see if we can transform this thing. What do you say, Colt? Copy that. So I went ahead and pressure washed the front end already, and the reason that I'm getting these ready is so that we can cut them all up and install the BCs when we reinstall the entire rear subframe, which I also already washed. But let's see if we can head up to Proper Fab Works, get these front ends chopped and welded with the new BCs, and then that way, once the bushings are done, we can throw everything in, all the suspension at once. All right, so before we get up there, we gotta open this box and get the fronts out of here. You gonna help or what? I can't see with your head nowhere. The other way. So many layers. Boom. There's one, and there is 2. Like I said, pretty interesting the way that these go together. I told you I was going to talk to you a little bit about it. Here we go. So the way that these coilovers are going to work is that on the factory strut, the entire strut is molded into the knuckle. And so because they're welded into the knuckle, you have to cut the factory strut off of the spindle and then take that spindle or that knuckle and kind of slide it into this area here and weld up the bottom of this sleeve onto the strut. I think technically the only piece we need to take up to proper is these bottom sleeves. So I'll probably just take just the sleeves. They are marked front on both of them. They're kind of hard to mistaken in your kit, being that the front is coilovers and the rear is a shock, aka a divorce setup. Divorce setup meaning that the shock and the spring are separate. So there's a spring in here, you can't see it, but that's divorced, and then this is a traditional style. So we'll take these off and then we'll head up to proper and let's go bug Tony. All right guys, you made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel in another way, you can head to holdfast-usa.com. Buy anything on the website. It helps us keep this content coming to you. Huge thanks to the sponsors as well who support all these different series that we want to bring you guys. Give them a follow, give them a like, tell them Micah sent you. As always, boys, stay safe.